Everybody. I'm Isaiah, a friend of Dandy's. I first met Dandy in the summer of 2017, and I just saw this person grow and blossom into this amazing spirit. He began to find this true calling of his intention to bring joy and life to people that we share as a common bond with all of us. And his passion for life spawned these seeds of intent and wings of change. And we've become this voice of love and compassion for all of us, for all of humanity. And it's kind of forward this movement is something great. And I feel like it's going to touch many people. And this passion for life has just grown immensely over the time that I've seen him in the last 6 years. It's just really, this movement within him has really blossomed into something great, and it's wonderful to see. So, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dan Lyon, the author of Death to Lefties.
Hello, how are you guys doing this evening?
Okay.
This book has been kind of a passion of mine, being able to write. Since I was in high school, I had a teacher named Jolene Ramos who really encouraged me, really inspired me to be able to put forth everything that I had to be able to share an idea, to share ourselves. And that really just kind of helped me through life. I love to write. Anybody that knows me knows that I love to write. I love to share ideas. I love to ask that question. And I like to ask the question that makes me have to go look for an answer. And that's what Death to Lefties is. I got inspired one day by a question. The question was, why is the world only 10% left-handed? And that doesn't make sense to me, because we have 8 billion people in the world. That tells me that only 800 million of them are left-handed. And how is our society really functioning if only 10% of us are left-handed? That just doesn't make sense. So I dove into it, and I started finding out that some of the persecutions of not only left-handed people, but green-eyed people through time, women through time, elderly, babies, it doesn't matter. Life has been persecuted against and taken away from us, and it's up to us to really raise our voices and ask the question, why? Get that answer. If you don't like the answer, look for a different answer. Look for it. If it doesn't fit what it is that you're looking for, then there's got to be another answer. There has to be something that makes sense to you. Death to Lefties is making sense to me because it's helping me open a passion in the mind to not only the world, but beyond. What is beyond? So tonight, I'm going to read to you a chapter out of my book. I hope you guys really enjoy it. I actually came across an idea I'd like to share a poem with you before we start. This world and this life we can't get through alone. So we call on other lives through the cellular phone. We feel a heavy toll as we walk life's road, and it takes a strong heart to help carry our heavy load. My true life had just started because Ron Gateway in the trees, and now the world will hear as I read you Death to Lefties. And I'm not telling you where it's from, so if you would like to read more, please, by all means, buy the book. The cold night bites her cheeks and face as she runs through the dark streets. The cobblestones under her feet round and uneven, making her stumble as she runs and fears for her life. The dark night shadows cast life before her that trick her mind, allowing her pursuers to gain ground. She felt a hand scraping her back, grabbing her dress and pulling back, stopping her quick in her tracks. The strong hand gripped tight, lifting the girl and slamming her to the ground, knocking her head against a large stone in the road, blurring her eyes and senses, her back cracking as she let go a huge gasp, the wind being knocked out of her. A large fist hurled towards her face as her blurred vision tried to comprehend comprehend the image that was upon her. Thud! As the large fish smashed her face, breaking her nose, swelling her eyes with tears. The huge arm and hand pulled back once more as the young woman snapped to, coughing, wiping her eyes, a rage burning deep. With the large hand pulled back and the man kneeling over her, the woman pushed up with her hands sharply, throat chopping her attacker, his hands clutching his throat as he let go of the woman. Her senses slightly confused, she kicked straight up from her back, her heel cracking the man under his chin, rattling his teeth, sending him falling back to the cobblestone road with a thud. The woman lay back for a second, catching her breath, letting the cold air wake her senses. She rolled over to her knees, quickly, looking up through the hair that was falling in front of her face, her gaze on the coughing attacker. The man before her laid out on his back, holding his throat and face, as she stood quickly, ran and gave the man a swift, hard kick to his loins, cracking the man's heritage holder, sending the loudest scream the world had ever heard into the night. She stood above her attacker, tears and sweat dripping down her face, her teeth clenched, her fist clenched, as she heard a voice behind her. "Stop, witch!" She whipped her head around and saw a man, her head whipping around her head to cover her face like a mask, as she watched her archer draw back his bow and arrow, aiming it at her heart. Quickly dropping to her stomach, she looked up and saw an alley, raised and darted towards it, hearing the bowstring release behind her as the arrow hurled towards her. Reaching the alley, the arrow barely missed her body as she slammed into the wall of the building in the alley. Gaining her composure, she looked down the dark tunnel, the moonlight shining towards the end of the narrow corridor, blocked and no way out. She looked to the other side of the cobblestone road to see an alley extension between two closed shops and lit in a lit way to safety. As she peered around the corner, the man seemed to be closing in, his bow once again drawn, aimed in her direction. She ducked back quickly, slowing her breathing, calmed herself, remembered her training, knelt and looked again. The man was an obvious hunter. She pulled back once more, clutching her chest to calm herself. His stature was tall, dominant, and strong. He carried his bow as his weapon of choice, and his eyes like both a hawk and a lion. The over 1,000 kills the man had behind him, were that of legend, and the kill before him was that of destiny. His bow pulled tight, he gracefully strolled down the cobble road. His feet seemed to glide over the rocks, his breathing that of a monk, his aim deadlier than a cobra. She peered around the corner once more, saw her bringer of death approaching, and ducked back against the wall. She closed her eyes, said a quick chant, repositioned herself on her knees in a sprinter's stance facing the road. Closing her eyes and lowering her head, the woman thought of only one thing, survival. She looked up and took off with a shot from her position towards the alley across the street. The hunter eyed his target, led her just a step, held his breath, and released. The arrow cut through the air as the woman hit her stride. Her left arm pulled back as her right arm flew forward. A sharp pain hitting her just under her armpit, piercing both lungs and the lower part of her heart as she took one last step and stumbled. Freedom and safety just steps away. The woman laid there, the arrow sticking out of either side of her torso and under her arms, blood pooling out of the openings of her wounds. Her breathing shallow as she heard the faint steps of the man approaching behind her. "You can never outrun me, Ella," the man said as he got closer. "The roads are always closing in," he said, stopping next to her and kneeling. She could hear his deep breathing above her, his heart pounding from the fresh kill as she lay there gasping. As he knelt next to the woman, he grabbed the metal end of the arrow, tugging on it, trying to urge the woman to her back. Her screams filled the air as her body was forced to a position of more pain. The hunter stood up once again, and looking down at the woman gasping, blood forming at the sides of her mouth, he placed his foot across her forehead, pressed down firmly, grabbed the arrow by the metal tip, and in one fluid motion pulled the arrow through, feeling the woman's body twitch and jerk under his foot, her screams filling the night. Taking his foot off her head, he removed a long, sharp knife from under his shirt behind him, knelt, and placed the shiny, detailed blade to her throat. Taking a deep breath, he went in close and whispered, "Ella, time to wake up." As the woman sat straight up in her bed, her body on fire and soaked from sweat, her breathing heavy and irregular. She looked around the room as she was home, safe in her own bed. She sat there for a few moments, waking and slowing her breathing as her heart raced and centering herself. It was a dream. And though not real, she felt as though she had just lived through the harrowing experience. Ella pulled back the blanket and got out of bed, her naked body exposed to the night as she walked to the window and opened it, feeling the cold air of the night against her face, cooling her exposed body. She could feel the bumps on her body grow from the chilled night air as her body tightened and the hair stood on end. What was the night telling her? Looking out, she saw the moon bright as light clouds filled the sky, and the shadows of the night below still. She took a deep breath, closed her eyes, and thought of her father's voice, bringing her back to a simpler time and allowing it to soothe her. The dream was too real, and her heart seemed to feel the pain as if it were for real. What could be the reason for this? As she reached for the windows to close, a shadow moved in the night, and as she looked, the shadow of a boat disappeared into the darkness. Thank you.
Very good job.
This has been a really fun story. This is a 6-part story. Part 1 is for sale this evening for $10. All the proceeds are going to help further this. We have an image to grow. We have a world to help build, really build. And we can't do it without people, without imaginations. Who do we inspire and how do we inspire them? What is next? Not only for myself, but for Gateway Education, for Crescent City, and for you. We are all potential authors. We are all potential writers. The word can't should not even be in our vocabulary, because can't means I'm not even going to try. That means they won, and they will never win as long as we try. So let's raise our voices and let's raise our hearts and literally change the world, because it starts today. No walls, it starts today. Thank you so much. Thank you. If anybody has any questions,